Well, thank you all for sharing. That's all amazing. So again, just I know we're a little tight on time. We'll just jump right in. So we're going to start off hearing a little bit from David, who, as he mentioned, is the executive director of Towards Justice out of Colorado and is on our board of directors and has been with PPP for quite a while now, right? It's been a few years at
Few
least.
years. I have no idea. I have
Yeah,
no idea.
yeah. I
You have no idea how time moves. So no,
will
yeah.
say, yeah, we'll say it's fine, but yeah, really just keyboard member, someone who's always a great resource for all of us. So we're really grateful to have you here with us. Um, so I'm gonna just jump right in and toss some questions towards you. So our first is basically just getting to like why join PPP. So, given your background in workers' rights, economic justice, like why do you think that lawyers and law students should consider joining People's Parity Project? Like, how can PPP provide some unique opportunities for legal professionals to make a tangible impact?
Yeah, well, it's a really great question, and I should say, like, in responding to the question, that I think we all have to acknowledge that it's not for lawyers and law students, like becoming invested in something like this isn't like it's not easy, right? Like there's a lot going on, right? Um, and I and that and it takes a lot of effort. I mean, Charlie, whom I got to know when she was at CU Law School, and it has well, I don't know if Charlie, if you would have considered yourself an organizer before law school, but you turned into like an amazing organizer, right? And you are an amazing organizer, right? I think you saw I had many conversations with Charlie about like the challenges, right, of getting lawyers and law students involved when they have so much going on, right? And frankly, part of that is also by design, right? The profession, in law school is set up, right, to like channel our energies in certain ways, and sometimes to channel them away from like other sorts of efforts. And so it takes a lot of effort to do it. It really matters, and I think the reason it matters and the reason to do it is because we see all the time in the practice of law, and people in the world see all the time, that behind so many of the systemic injustices that plague our country is the law and the legal profession. Like the law and the legal profession is the tool of all kinds of injustice, right? It's in, we and very often like lawyers are right there involved in the worst of it, right? We see it in and every time that you see a fine print contract drafted by lawyers, right? Every time that you show up in eviction court or debt collection court or any, criminal court around the country, right? In the ways that lawyers and the legal profession stacks the deck against working people, working families, and in favor of corporations and corporate power. The law is very often the tool of injustice and oppression, and it is like absolutely essential that lawyers and the legal profession are part of the solution. And I think we really need a movement inside the law and the legal profession to make that happen. And that is that's the role that PPP is filling, which I think is like an exceptionally important one, and really the task of all of you, right, to sort of like play a part in that conversation and that movement.
Yeah, no, I think that's just like such an important point. I think that was what drew me here as well. Is just seeing, going to law school and being just like, this is such a mess. Like, what am I getting myself into, right? Am I going to be a part of the problem? And then finding a place where you can be a part of the solution, actually work for people and try to advance something that's not just like corporate focused or just like maintaining the status quo. I think that's like just so important. So I really appreciate that
Yeah.
response.
That reminded me just of an experience I just had the other day, right? Where I had a conversation with an Uber driver in Texas, right? Texas is a place where like Uber drivers don't have anything in the way of state or local level protections, right? And there's not any enforcement that's there to protect them. And this driver was telling me that he had this like really great idea of how he was going to hold Uber accountable in court, right? And I had to explain to him that there was like really not a path for doing that because he had agreed as a condition of signing up for the company to give up his right to go to court, to give up his right to stand up for, other drivers, across the country. And he was just like astonished, right? Like how could how could this possibly be the way this works? Like everyone talks about the right to a jury trial, it doesn't mean anything. And I think I felt myself getting sucked into like because the call was over and I wanted to move on to the next thing. So just getting sucked into the sort of the standard sort of role of the lawyer to be there to be like, well, yes, sorry, that's the way the law works. Um, and and it was like it's just so important and helpful to like have those moments though where you get that outside perspective of someone just being like astonished by this injustice, right? And I think we need to like make sure that we confront those problems all the time. And even if like the day to day of our practice doesn't necessarily allow us to take them on, that's why like being part of the movement and being part of the effort to take them on structurally is so essential.
That's awesome. Um, so on that, I guess like, in just like, I don't know, being more in touch like with the community really. Uh, so I think like something that we've seen from your work is like someone's been kind of like who's worked closely with grassroots organizations, organizers on the ground. You're working alongside some of these people in the litigation that you're doing. How can joining PPP kind of help lawyers and law students use their legal skills beyond litigation to kind of advocate for systemic change? So you have your own lane there, but like, how do we work alongside like the people working in these kind of like movements, and how does that kind of complement traditional legal practice to you?
Yeah. So a couple of responses there. I mean, first, I do think it's really essential to recognize that even when we're playing the role of advocate and organizer and part of the movement within the profession, we're still very much part of the elite, right? We are like we are the elite, right? And often and situated as in that way relative to the movements that are like, trying to build power and take on these like really important and urgent fights. And that's always something to be like cognizant of, right? And I think and for us to understand our role in, and part of that often means being cautious about stepping into the role of like leader of a movement, right? As opposed to being as opposed to complementing a movement or serving as a lawyer to the movement. That being said, right, I think like that so it's important, in other words, for us to like recognize our limitations, right? And also to appreciate that like, we come from, often this elite space that, movements need to take on and challenge. That being said, because of our position, we do have like a lot of power, right? And power to identify where injustice may lie and power to like speak out against it, right? And I think that is what PPP can can be so helpful in allowing us to do, right? Is to say, look, the yeah, like I don't need to be like a cog in the wheel of this injustice, right? To play my part the way the profession has seemingly set me up to do, right? Like I can like speak out against the system that I am like a part of. And in fact, sometimes that voice is really like is absolutely essential. And it's hard. It's really hard, right? Like something that I often think about, right? In um is and talk to PPP organizers about is like that I appreciate that when I was a law student, I don't always know if I would have had the courage to take on these fights, right? Because like to challenge the profession in these ways, because it often you're living in a world in which is the water you swim in, right? Where it would be like incomprehensible to challenge some of these like these expectations, and yet like the fact that we are positioned as lawyers and law students with a special insight into like how the law is used to perpetuate injustice, that gives us a special responsibility to do that. So for example, just diving into like one tiny example, but like to talk, I think it's really important for lawyers to talk about all of the like amazing opportunities that we have, first of all, to like to level the playing field through state court, through reforms of the state court system, right? And also really important for us to identify how much injustice is done in state courts, right? By state court judges, right? By the same state court judges who come to like, you know, all the bar association meetings, right? And fancy dinners and that we may be invited to. And, you know, I mean, using as one example of PPP's work, I know that's something that Steve has done at People's Parity Project and pointing out how professional experiences before before they were elevated to the bench have you know shifted and or can predict how judges are likely to you know rule on cases that are brought to them you know when they're on the bench, right? And whether they're likely to rule in favor of corporate interests and corporate power or or apply the law in favor of working people. And I think that kind of voice is really you know, is exceptionally important, and lawyers are uniquely well situated to make those kinds of arguments. Um, um, and and it's really hard to do, you know, but I think we need to do it, and we can and should do it, while at the same time being cognizant that the goal isn't to like just build more power for different kinds of elite lawyers, right? But actually to, you know, as People's Parity Project likes to put it, right, to like unfuck the law, you know. Steve, did I characterize the report correctly? I was trying to remember it.
Oh yeah, no, you're good. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So it was like looking at just how in the case of housing, housing cases like eviction cases, your legal background influences the way that you judge, which is if you haven't been kind of just indoctrinated into this idea of judges being, you put on this robe and now all of a sudden you're this like magical objective observer, makes sense. Like we all bring our experiences to whatever we're doing, right? So, but yeah, no, that's a good characterization of that, and I really appreciate that response. Um, I'm looking at my next question. You kind of covered it already, so I think we might have time for like one question from an attendee. If anyone has questions for David before we move on to our student organizers. So if anyone has any questions, I have one of you, the first one who can do it, pop in and let's ask a question.
Can I elaborate on a point I made earlier? Just
Oh
extend
yeah,
out.
no,
Let
go
me just
for it.
extend out the PPP, the PPP, what was it? Motto, slogan, like the unfuck the law with motto, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like
Meaning
the official slogan, right? Like
official, yeah, whatever the official slogan may be.
unofficial
I,
slogan, everybody, yeah.
the unofficial slogan. We need you need lawyers to like unfuck the law. You absolutely need lawyers to do it, right? And people in the legal profession to do it. And at the same time, the goal, of course, of doing it is not just like, reestablished, is to entrench the law as power. It's still is a sort of like the sort of powerful force in people's lives that it is now. It's like to like sort of undo the hegemony of the profession. So like that's the sort of like the role that we have that I think it's really essential for lawyers to play, which is a tricky balance, but I think PPP can and does it really well. So yeah.
Awesome. And yeah, I think like something that you know the more whatever socially palatable version of it is to, we're unrigging the law, which I think is maybe a little goes to that
Oh
same
yes, sorry, unrigging.
goes to
I'm
that same
sorry.
point. Oh no, I mean I think we use unfuckable all the time. So it's fine. But
Democratize the
um
law. Yeah, let's do that.
democratize the law, unrig the law, things like that, where it's just like, it basically the idea is like, yeah, this is we can see that the law is kind of biased in favor of like corporate power, state power, things like that, and like bring that back towards the actual people, right? So yeah, I think that's amazing. So thank you for pointing that out, David. Um, so yeah, thank you so much, David. I really think that was really great overview, I think, of just like kind of what we do and like how it can impact like the practice, the actual practice of law, right? It's not just, I think we started as a law student organization, but like, we're growing out into the fall kind of profession here. and really appreciate hearing from folks who are involved, who are like, farther along and kind of, I know working with law students closely, and people are always concerned, just like, oh, what is this going to mean like for my career and things like that. And it's like, it's always great to hear from people who are fully dedicated to this work and are doing amazing things. So we really appreciate it, David. Thank you so much. So next, we're going to move on to two of our student organizers. So I'm really grateful to have Charlie Goodnow, who is a recent graduate of Colorado University Law, and Angela Raphael, who is a 3L at GSU Law, both of whom are or were in our Leadership Fellows program. And yeah, we're really grateful to have you join us to kind of share some of your experience as fellows and as organizers within PPP. So I will jump right in and give you our first question, which is what initially drew you to join PPP as a student organizer in the first place, and how did your experience as a student with PPP kind of shape your perspective of the importance of organizing within the legal field? I'd rather either of you.
I'll go ahead. So I was not actually drawn to PPP. I was more like dragged to PPP because my chapter's co-founder, Zach, we met like the week before law school started and very quickly realized that we both had the same very like leftist ideals. And he was like, you should do this thing with me. So I did. So that's how I got to PPP in the first place. But the thing that I loved most about it is, like I had realized right before getting into law school, was that the majority of law school and the mainstream when you're in there is absolutely nothing of what so many of us like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed people go into law school for. And this seemed to be the only organization where you can be both an activist and a lawyer, and you can use your lawyering skills for activism, whereas it seemed like in most of the other organizations like ACS, and I can drag on them because I was also president of that chapter, it's like, yeah, we're lawyers first, we're progressive second, and it's mostly for our careers. Whereas at People's Parity Project, I think it's so cool that it's a bunch of us where we want our careers to be unrigging the law, unfucking the law, and like actually what you came to law school to do is not what you're doing in law school, but it is what you're doing at People's Parity Project.
Yeah. I think, my experience was a little different. Before law school, as David mentioned, I was not an organizer. I worked in tech and I worked on government contracts, and I was a project manager. And I realized that I had defaulted to sort of this like corporate way of thinking and getting things done. And I've learned a lot as an organizer about alternative ways to work in community and with community to approach these problems in the law. So that was sort of one of the things that I knew I was looking for, a perspective I didn't have, skills that I didn't have. And I also, of course, wanted a network of people who had shared values. And it's been really helpful to be a part of People's Parity Project and sort of be exposed to a lot of different kinds of people who are involved in movement lawyering. I think one of the biggest things that I took away from being involved in People's Parity Project is the importance of working with non-lawyers. So working directly with community members and community leaders, policy folks, and media. There's all kinds of people and entities that are needed to make change. And I had no idea who to engage with and how to engage with them. So it's been really cool to be a part of People's Parity Project and do that sort of work. But yeah, generally, I think like if I had gone to law school and not been a part of People's Parity Project, I would have been a public interest lawyer for sure. But I think the difference is now I see myself as a movement lawyer with an organizing skill set, and I think that's totally different. Oh, Steve, you're on mute.
Thank you. So yeah, no, I love that from both of you. I think like that's one thing that's always interesting to me. It's just like all the different places that people come here from, but then still find kind of like a home, like while you're in law school or after or whatever. And that was my experience before, like I joined PPP as a law student before I was on staff. And yeah, I always love hearing these stories. So I appreciate you both sharing. So for our next question, what are some of the challenges that you faced kind of building or strengthening a PPP chapter on campus, and how did you overcome those? Are there some strategies maybe that like you found were most effective for like engaging your fellow law students in some of the organizing efforts that you've been working on or have worked on?
I can start. I think my answer is pretty straightforward, which is just, know what people are, what incentives motivate people to get involved with work. Understand that obviously, like you, everybody else has a lot of competing demands on their time. So whatever you can do to give people credit, school credit, to participate in work that People's Parity Project is doing, or volunteer pledge hours. We did a lot of that. Lunch, things like that. I think there is this issue of maybe accommodating too much and attracting folks who aren't really invested in the work and are just looking for some free like volunteer hours. So I think that's something you need to hold in your mind and consider. And I think there's also this issue of, as David mentioned, like people are perhaps scared to get involved in things, scared to hold judges accountable, for instance, and then end up in the same courthouse. And so I wish that I had good ideas about how to reassure people about that. I think what I'll say is now that I have graduated from law school, I think that you're in a really unique position to do these things as a law student. You have some extra considerations once you're an attorney and bound by the rules of ethics. Maybe that's something to keep in mind. But the pressures are real for sure. And I don't know, Angela, if you have any thoughts on that. But yeah, bringing people to the table for me was really challenging because I started the chapter from the ground up. And nobody came to our first meeting and we went from there, but it can be done.
I will say Georgia State isn't the best example for challenges because Georgia State happens to be a super liberal school with a really liberal faculty and student body. So getting interest wasn't really the issue. But what we did do is, first we like always had food and we always had good food. Everyone gets Chick-fil-A or pizza for like the first student body meeting. We said no Chick-fil-A, no pizza. Well, no Chick-fil-A ever, but no Chick-fil-A, no pizza. And the other thing is we made sure that it was really obvious that our programming was stuff that's really important to local issues. So in Atlanta, there is Cop City, which I know you have all heard of by now. And so our first year, basically all of our programming was based around voting rights, which we're in Atlanta, we're in Georgia. Voting rights is another really big issue. It was voting rights in Cop City. So even though we weren't doing a lot of the like traditional workers' rights or like state court judge things that People's Parity Project is kind of known for, we were doing a lot of the movement stuff that we knew our students would be interested in. So we had student volunteers from People's Parity Project groups. Sorry, I just got distracted. I'm currently fostering a second kitty and they're finally friends. So I got distracted. were doing like legal research for the Stop Cop City movement in their legal battles. So to us, the engagement was like we're trying to figure out what the local issues were, and then we kind of tailored ourselves to that. But yeah, as for like building the chapter, me and Zach built it from the ground up as one else, but I think we had like 60 members by the end of our first year. Thankfully at Georgia State, that was not the issue.
Yeah, I think like, so both of you, I think there are things I just want to like raise up a little bit and like, yeah, so one, just Angela, I think that that's a good example of just like something I think that is important to us. Like we have, you know, some like our national priorities, things like that, but like all of our chapters like are always kind of free to find where the energy is on campus, right? Like what are the issues that are actually affecting the people in your community? And maybe that is not like something that is like that we've been working on or something like that, but we can always like find ways to support local work like that you know, you find something like, I mean, yeah, like we had a chapter in Georgia working on Stop Cop City, working on voting rights, like that's, of course, like that's amazing, we're going to support that. And just bringing that same kind of like organizing mentality to it, I think like, you know, that's something that we can always support. I think that's really important. And then Charlie, you had mentioned the issue of like trying to bring people in, and sometimes when you know sometimes people will be worried about, you know, like, oh, is this gonna be a problem for me? Like, yeah, if I'm like holding a judge accountable and then I'm appearing before them, are they gonna screw me over? Like, I mean, I can't say that won't happen because some judges are dicks, you know, but like, but one thing I can say is that we've done some work, like talking to public interest employers, more movement type employers. And one of the things they tell us over and over again is that like the people that we want to bring on are the ones who've actually shown some commitment to this work. You know, it's like, I don't need somebody who was like, you know, running law review. I don't need somebody who, you know, had an A in every single class. I need somebody who actually cares about what it is that we do, right? And like that, this is a place where you can really kind of make that case. And that's the way that I try and, you know, make the case for the people who really are committed to this kind of work, is that like, this is how you show that. You know, you don't do it by just being like the kind of cookie cutter, you know, best interviewee at OCI kind of thing. It's like you need to like actually be doing the work.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're about. So
Can I add to that?
yeah,
Two things. One, you know, I think being an attorney, especially this kind of attorney, requires a lot of courage, and you're going to need to do scary things and stand up to people, and it's adversarial, and you know, it's good practice. Number two, that's exactly how I got my job. I was doing PPP work and partnered with my current employer to some extent. And so, yeah, it's, you know, I would say it directly translated into a job pretty much for me. Some other hoops to jump through, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. So I'm gonna jump down a little bit, just looking at the time. So just briefly from each of you, if you had like one piece of advice that you would share to a new PPP organizer, prospective PPP organizer, what do you think that might be?
I know mine immediately. Build out your local Rolodex. Find the lawyers who are doing what you are interested in and what your chapter would be interested in your area. When you are doing some lunchtime, like lunch and learn panel event, find the local lawyers, whether you know them or not, do the cold calls if you need to. And then secondarily, but like just as importantly, use people parity projects like National Rolodex, and they may even know some local people too. But the networking and the network building of People's Parity Project is super, super helpful for your own personal career, but also for your chapter's longevity and also for the programming of your chapter. super important. Build out your local Rolodex.
Agree. My advice is, and this might not apply to larger chapters that are better established, but my main advice is do one campaign at a time. Not two, not three, one. I think like we became like spread a little too thin, and people were like, oh, you're doing this, but oh, you're also doing this. And it's hard enough to get enough people to support one thing when you're just getting started. Quality over quantity, I gotta say. You're gonna have a lot of people potentially approaching you and being like, I heard about your student group. Do you want to partner with us? I think this would be perfect. And you're like, it would be perfect, but next year. I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, I think that, again, like you said, I think it really depends on your situation, because I think, you know, Angela's talking about just like, yeah, you got so many people, you can do all these things, but like, yeah, that was my experience. Is that our first year we did like a million different things, and it was like, wow, it just kind of fell apart because everyone was doing 1,000 things. And so like, yeah, it really depends, and that's something we can help with too. We're like, yeah, when we're doing our jobs well, we're helping you to kind of like manage those kinds of questions. But yeah, no, that's great. Well, thank you both so much. We really appreciate you coming out here. You're both just rock star PvP organizers, and we are so glad that you can come and share some of your experience and knowledge with our prospective folks. So thank you both for joining us.
Of course. And please feel free to reach out to me on Slack if you have any questions, need to vent, need advice. I'm available.
Yeah, we will be sharing that at the end. So if you're not on our Slack, you can join us and contact Angela there. Awesome. Thank you so much. So lastly, we have, oh, okay, great. So lastly, we have Sejal Singh, who is one of the co-founders of PPP and is on our PPP Action, our 501c4 board, and also helped to start our first lawyers chapter out of Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us, Sejal.
It's great to meet all of you. This has been so inspiring and exciting. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Great.
Awesome. So I'm going to jump right in because we're getting a little late here. So what brought you and these other co-founders to start organizing while you were in law school? Like, why do you think that kind of took off in the way that it did? And why do we need to keep organizing on law school campuses, do you think?
Well, I think was an immediate cause and then sort of a deeper cause. On a more deep level, I think we're really into it because we come to law school to represent workers or represent consumers or support reproductive rights and fight for racial justice. And we found ourselves in a, like, I don't think I showed up to law school entirely naive about the legal system. I knew that it didn't work perfectly for different people, but I was pretty shocked by how bad it was. And that really made me angry, right? It made me want to change things. And so that led me to start this organization. I think on a more proximate level, we were really motivated to start by the scourge of forced arbitration. As you guys may know, more than half of, oh, I'm sorry, you're having trouble hearing? Is everyone having trouble hearing?
I mean, a little bit. It's like a little bit.
It's like going in and out for me. I'm sorry. I don't know if it's my
Oh,
computer.
I'm sorry. Give me like 2 seconds to try to see if it's my headphones. Is that better? Better word?
I don't, you guys can decide.
I can hear you. Maybe we try audio
It's a little,
unfortunately.
it's like a little echoey, yeah.
Can you all hear me now?
That's
So
better.
perfect. Okay. Once again, big corporations trying to get our scrappy organization down. I'm sorry about that. I think we'll probably have better sound quality if we do this audio only. But I would love to see I'm very disappointed not to be seeing all of your faces. To go back to Steve's question, I think, the proximate reason that we started was that we were extremely disturbed by the rise of forced arbitration, and in particular, the fact that more than half of non-union private sector workers today are now subject to an agreement that means that when their rights are violated, they can't go to court. And the truth is, like, while you could go to this shadowy black box arbitration system, the reality is that the overwhelming majority of people who would have brought their claims in court, which is certainly not even a half of all the people who experience violations of their rights in the first place, don't. And so that was pretty disturbing to us, but it was particularly disturbing because we were learning about the ways that arbitration have been used to cover up serious violations of in particular affected women, queer people, and people of color at work, and in particular but arbitration was being used to cover up widespread sexual and racial harassment that really came to light in the Me Too movement. And the truth is that made us really angry, and I think rightly so, right? We came to law school because we wanted to use the legal system, as flawed as we understood it to be, to support workers' rights. And once we got there, we discovered that there was a very real chance that most of the people that we sought to represent would never be able to get into court in the first place, right, to seek redress. And we began organizing because we understood that the ways that corporate domination of the legal system impacted our rights, impacted the rights of people we cared about, impacted our future clients' rights, and had particular impacts on gender and racial justice, in addition to suppressing the whole working class. And so I got organized really because I was like, there's not really much I can do by practicing law to solve this problem. The Supreme Court has made its decision. We're not going to change their mind. Really, the only thing we can do is change the law by building people power. And while that is only one of the many issues that people work on here at the Security Project, to me, it is a perfect example of the ways that corporate power has gotten us all down by exploiting the courts. And so I always think of that campaign as a great example of what we can do. We began organizing against employers who are forcing workers to sign forced arbitration agreements. We successfully forced several employers to stop using forced arbitration agreements. And it also got a lot of headlines and generated attention that led to a small but important win, which is that Congress recently passed legislation that will prevent the use of forced arbitration to keep sexual harassment claims out of court in particular. So I'm very proud of that, but to me, that is just the very beginning of what we all need to accomplish together, because there are many other ways that, workers' rights are suppressed through this coercive legal tool. But that is the answer, right? I realized that organizing was the only way that we were going to solve many of the problems that I cared about. And that's why I wanted to organize lawyers to fix it.
Awesome. I love that. And I think that's something that I know really drew me to PPP too, where it's just even thinking of it within the terms that you kind of learn in law school, right? Just you have to do everything you can to represent your client. But all they teach you is how to do that within the bounds of the laws exists, right? But if you are working with certain people, in certain communities, certain groups, things like that, the law is designed to screw those people over, So the only way you can actually represent them is to try and change the law, right? So yeah, I really appreciate that response. So I'm going to jump down just a little bit here because it's getting late, but could you share some of your experience helping to start the DC Lawyers chapter after you did graduate and moved on from your student organizing, like what kind of need did you see for organizing among lawyers? And what are some of the things that you all have been working on down in DC?
Absolutely. So I came to DC after my clerkship and decided that, the work that we'd started on our campus was really just beginning. And I wanted to have a place for lawyers to organize about, mostly the members of our chapter are pretty progressive lawyers in the public interest space. Most of us are focused on economic justice, in particular, the rights of workers and renters. But we wanted a place to organize around the ways that the law was just like really screwing us over and screwing our clients over and screwing our movements over. And so we thought it was important to like have a chapter that was focused on those issues. And also we realized that like we have a lot to contribute to local movements who, rightly recognize that law is not the sole answer to their problems, but like there's a lot of things that lawyers can provide to local organizers. And so we decided we wanted to help fill some of those gaps here in our community. So our work fits in two major buckets. We do a lot of organizing and political education of folks here in DC about PPP's broader court reform agenda. People like in this Zoom space have probably spent a lot of time thinking about how to right-size the role of courts in our democracy. But the truth is that the overwhelming majority of lawyers I talk to, including lawyers who work in government, interest on the Hill, they haven't even been exposed to many of the things that we're talking about really seriously. They've never even heard of some of the ways that we've talked about reining in out of control right-wing courts and helping make sure that they play an appropriate role in our democracy rather than an anti-democratic one. And so there's like a real role that we can play for political education, both between the core group for the core group of our members, right? I have a lot more to learn about, Lincoln's history of being combative to the courts, but also there's a lot that we can do to address the broader legal community's blind spots on these issues. And we think that's an important role for us to play in our community because there's a lot of folks in it or adjacent to it who have a lot of power over these debates and or might one day. And so, that political education work has been a real opportunity and a pleasure for us. Separately, we do a lot of work sort of in allyship with local organizing. Most of that work has happened through our Worker Power Committee. So for example, we are running a series of Know Your Rights trainings with local organizers like TSA, Jobs with Justice, Unite Here, really trying to like walk workers through the weeds on like what their rights are in the workplace and how to enforce them and what are all the complications that come with being a tech worker and what are the ways that employers exploit these loopholes and how can you really get that, a lot of ways that lawyers exploit workers is by getting kind of complicated, getting into the weeds, in ways that are illegal, but like a little bit harder for workers to spot. And so we're trying to help build power for the working class here in our city by empowering them with those tools and also helping them fight back themselves. And so to me, it feels really good because I have a job. I'm a practicing lawyer. I do a mix of appellate litigation, trial litigation, and regulatory work. And so I like spend all day like thinking about the law, but there's something a little bit different about doing it in this like space where it's really about helping people understand and exercise their own power outside of the law. Like that's one of the things I love about labor, like in labor law. And one of the reasons our chapters prioritize it. It's about the law, but like it's really about the fact that workers have power. And so it's been really fun to like help build that here, even in the very small ways that we have this comparative advantage of like knowing all this law. We've like partnered with really amazing organizers with these really broad bases and like come together to do this thing that there's a real need for.
It's amazing. Thank you so much. And yeah, we, as always, appreciate all the work that you have done to get this organization going and continue kind of breaking new ground here. with us. So thank you so much, Sejal, for joining us.
Absolutely. If any of you move to DC, you should join our chapter. Hit me up.
Absolutely. And again, well, at the end, we'll share some ways to get involved there. So I'm going to really quickly run through how the things kind of go, like in chapters, and I pass off to Naomi for just like next steps if you want to get more involved. So basically, for just a quick rundown, there are a number of different ways that folks can get involved, but the main way to do it is through one of our chapters, and that can be through a student chapter or through a lawyer's chapter. We also, but you know, I'll touch on this a little bit later, but there are other ways that you can still be involved, even if there isn't a specific chapter that you're associated with. But that's kind of the main way that our work happens. And basically, our chapters are working on all different things. We have our kind of like some of the big national priorities, things like we've kind of alluded to over the course of the night, like, you know, we do a lot around like workers' rights. We do a lot around state courts, diversifying state courts, and also, you know, in federal courts as well, just doing other just court reform kind of issues. Those are some of our main issues. But when it comes down to the actual local chapter, there will be things that come up where it's just like there's a specific issue that's going on in your, like on your campus or in your community, something like that, that you could use this kind of legal organizing type approach to address. Like, we will fully support that, and you know, we have, you know, staff on hand who can help you with events, help you with campaigns, things like that. So that's, again, so that's where like a lot of the energy kind of is going. But again, like the main thing is like getting people on, you know, in your campus or in your city or whatever, is kind of just building community among progressive lawyers and law students, and finding what the issues are that are like most important to the people around you, and then let's work towards improving the legal system to actually make them serve those needs, right? That's the main thing there. We do that through, and we support that in a few ways. I mean, like I said, we have, you know, staff support that we can give. We also, all of our chapters get, you know, in addition to anything like for a student chapter, you know, the school might give you some funding, things like that. Lawyers chapters, you know, you don't have that option, but we also provide $600 of funding per academic year for all of our chapters to either supplement your school funding, or if you're not an official student organization, just like fund your events, campaigns, things like that. And then we also have some national events and campaigns that you can kind of plug into as well. And that's whether you're in a chapter or you're not. And that can kind of vary. Like last year, we did like a court reform reading group, which was pretty amazing, actually. So like that's just for an example. Like we had, you know, bring people together, kind of think through like what would it look like to reform the courts and make them actually serve the people, right? So that's just some of the things that we're doing. But we're getting pretty close to time, so I think what I'm gonna leave that there for now and just put it out there that, you know, I'm gonna pass off Naomi to like let you know how to move forward with this if you want. But like, I'm always available. My contact information will be with that as well. You know, we're always happy to talk to anybody who's interested in working with us, or, you know, whether it's like actually starting a chapter or just like, hey, I have this issue going on, like, is this something you've dealt with? We can always just like chat as well. Like, this is being part of the movement to kind of like make this system work better is what we're doing. So like, whatever that looks like, we're happy to do it. So I will pass it off to Naomi to just close us out with the next steps. And thank you all so much for being here, and hopefully we'll hear from you again soon.
Hey y'all, so as you see, I have about 1 minute. I'm gonna make this really short. So we don't really have questions. So I dropped me and Steve's Calendly in the chat. If anybody would like to have it like pressing questions, need further clarification, want to get a little bit, dive a little deeper into what we discussed today, you're more than welcome to schedule a meeting with Steve and I. Also, like, for those of you that are still like fill us out, I recommend you, and I'm gonna drop this in the chat, join our Slack channel. It's a great resource for like connecting with some of our lead organizers and our chapter members. One of the channels that we have, which is the Perspective Chapters channel, is pretty much ran by PPP chapter members. It's a great place to get to know the organization, but also get to know those on the ground dealing with some of the issues like are going to arise for potential members and chapter members. The Slack channel is pretty dope. It's my baby right now. So please sign up, and if you have any questions, again, book a meeting with me and Steve, or sign up for our Slack channel. Thanks again for joining us, and I definitely look forward to continuing these conversations with y'all in the future.
That's all we got. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you guys so much.
Hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you.